Hello everybody, and welcome to the citywide reenactment of the final act of The Day the Earth Caught Fire. In between everything burning slowly to the ground and Daily Express journalists looking terribly worried, I, Alasdair Stuart, will be talking to prolific and fantastic author Danie Ware.
Hello.
About all her various endlessly impressive work. And obviously in a situation like this, the last thing we want to do is start off with a question which everyone's heard before. So where do you get your ideas from? I'm joking. I swear I'm joking.
Don't.
I won't.
Don't tease me. Not fair. I won't.
Let's talk about the Echo trilogy, which is which was your debut. You walk people through the plot setup for it.
I was a role player for many years, still am in fact, and through our role playing days we used to do a lot of what if gaming. You know,
oh, nice.
So we take like a vampire character and a cyberpunk character and a D&D character and we chuck them all in a pot to see what would happen. Or we drop a D&D character into the cyberpunk or the other way round. So that was where the whole concept of Echo came from. Echo himself is a very angry little cyber assassin who says rude words far too much, and he gets dropped slap bang into the middle of a D&D fantasy world and told that he has to save it. Needless to say, being the cynic that he is, he doesn't want any of this. So he throws a paddy and storms off. However, as the story goes on, almost in spite of himself, he makes friends, and slowly the politics masses up to the end of the big final war at the end of the trilogy, as these things do, and he finds himself being caught up in it, and he and his friends get terribly involved in it all, and then he takes part in the final battle, and it all goes.
And it really is fantastic. It's a little bit like, when I was reading it, the thing which I was put in mind of was, what if Johnny Rotten had been given the One Ring? You know, it had that kind of feel.
Yes.
One of the things that I loved about it was the way that you stayed very true to the requirements of each of the genres you were kind of mashing together. Because, as you say, Echo is gloriously vile. But he's dropped into this world where kind of the little things in life are vitally important. And one of my favourite passages was the logistics. I think it's in book 2, the logistics of running a business which is in a different physical location every couple of days. How you have to kind of lay in the right kinds of supplies and what that does.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious if you could kind of talk us through that kind of aspect of it a little bit. How much is under the surface with the Echo books?
The Echo books have a vast amount of world building, 2 lots of world building in fact, and I do have to say that with the cyberpunk particularly, a great deal of it wasn't done by me.
Really?
We had 2 cyberpunk DMs, GMs. One was a very steady, would run the game weekly, and the other one would come in a blaze of glory, burn everything down, and then disappear again. And actually, they played off each other really well. So yes, a lot. Echo is my character, and a lot of the characters did belong to me. But his mom, particularly, was not my creation. I can't give credit for her. And the other question was about the Wanderer.
Yes.
Yeah. There was very little below the surface of the Wanderer. The Wanderer was a plot device in the D&D, so going back to our what-if gaming. So what if you had an adventuring party? They always start off in a tavern because adventuring parties always do. So what happens if that tavern is in a different place every morning? It was a really good way to get the players in any adventuring party to the scenario and ensure that they didn't go astray on the way, you know. You're going to go over there and go into these ghost halls. No, we're not. We're going to go over here and do this. No, you're not. You're going over there and you're going into these ghost halls. So yeah, the Wanderer started out as a bit of a joke, but it became so established in the D&D gameplay that I had to keep it. I absolutely had to keep it.
I mean, I've done a fair bit of RPG writing, but I never put together that it's a player-proofing device.
It is.
And now I love it even more.
Yeah.
No, go in the bloody tunnel.
It is. Go to the planet, you know, whatever it is. The Wanderer will take you. You wake up in the morning and there are the halls of ghosts right there, and you've got no excuse. You have to go.
And you can have breakfast before you go. So
yeah,
I mean, it's a good payoff.
Yeah.
So the kind of genre collision elements of the trilogy, one of the things, like I say, that really impressed me. And obviously, from what you've been talking about, they offered you a tremendous amount of freedom. You could play with every kind of toy all at once.
Yeah.
Was there anything you found you couldn't do?
There was one line that I really wanted to put in, and my editor made me take it out because she said it was too close to the bone. And I wanted Echo to come out with at some point during the trilogy to say that he was a social leper, outcast and clean. Which, if you know the reference, I'm going to leave that to people's imaginations. If you know the reference, you know what I mean, and you'll know why. She also wanted me to take out the reference to him being called Echo with a silent G, because she thought that people wouldn't get it, but they do. So
that's one of the best, best lines.
Best lines. No, it was an enormous amount of freedom, all the more so because I'd spent all the time in my 20s writing the books, and that I wasn't thinking about publishers or what was publishable or what I could write or what I couldn't. I was just writing for me. It was almost like I was writing my own fanfic. So when I came back to start writing it again, I'd only really just come into the very, very edge of the BSFA industry in the UK, and I wasn't thinking about market trends or hashtags or what would sell or whether it would have a cowled bloke on the cover or anything else. I was just writing it because it was fun to write.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because that actually kind of brings me to my next couple of questions. I was really curious as to what the demands were of writing a trilogy as your debut, but from what you tell me, that just wasn't even on the horizon. You were just doing it to be doing it.
I was doing it to be doing it. I stopped writing for a very long time. So when I first came to London, I guess there were just too many other things going on. And then I went back to conventions for the first time in many, many years. The EasterCon in 2008, wonderful. And the guest of honour, Neil was there, China was there, it was huge, everybody came out of the woodwork. And suddenly I was back in the heart of the industry. I was there with Forbidden Planet, and I was suddenly refound a family that I'd lost so long before. And you know how welcoming conventions are. You know, you go there, everyone's your friend, even if you haven't met them yet. It's just... And I came back thinking, right, that's it, I'm going to go back to my writing. And I rewrote the first 5 chapters, and very tentatively I put them out on what was then Google Pages. And I sent a tweet to Twitter in its infancy going, what do people think of this? And I had such a slew of love for it in return. You know, everybody going, oh my God, this is brilliant. And then on the back of that, an author friend of mine then took it to his publisher, who said, can I see the rest of it?
Oh my God.
So I ended up writing my opus straight out of the gate. I didn't mean to. The next thing I know, whoosh, there it all is.
That's amazing, and in particular, I find it really interesting that you kind of intuitively hit a road that a lot of other people had used before they used it. I mean, Google Pages kind of becomes Wattpad, and you build an audience there.
Yeah. You know, so very, very early days of social media, even Twitter had only been around for a year or so at that point.
Wow, Twitter before it was sociopathic. Which is actually a thing that used to be true.
It was amazing. Twitter back in the day, I could get really nostalgic about it. You know, I made friends all over the world, wonderful people, fantastic people, people who I still know 12 years later. I've never met them, but they're my friends and I love them dearly, and I'd miss them if they went away, you know.
It's just now you have to swim through the detritus to get to them.
Shoulder through all the muck to get there, yes, you really do.
But focusing on the positive in all this, I find that really heartening, actually. That the kind of mechanisms to aid in launching an author were there even before, in a couple of the cases, the applications were really locked in. That's
it was
really
lovely.
cool.
I had no confidence in it at all. I said I'd stopped writing for such a long time because I didn't believe I could. And it all just snowballed from that point on. You know, it was an amazing thing to have happened.
I'm slightly stunned, actually. That's really cool. I'm curious, how much did it change? Because from what you tell me, you were writing this for quite a long time before.
All through my 20s, yes. I mean, I must have something like 750,000 words of utter rubbish. But it serves as an apprenticeship. You know, everything is an apprenticeship. No experience is ever wasted. Everything counts towards your writing, towards who you become and what you are. And I think it got a lot tighter. It had a lot more of my worldly experience put into it because I was very young when I started writing. It was also I was in a very angry place at the time, which is probably why Echo is as incredibly angry as he is. He sort of lightens up slowly as he goes on through the novels. But I think his anger was one of the things that carried it. It gave it such an amount of energy and forward motion because, you know, he never dithered. He was never stuck for something to do. It may not have been the right thing, and it may have involved blowing shit up, but he was never, ever stuck for an option.
Oh no, I mean, it is 3 straight books of the main character going, I know, I'll hit it, or kicking a door in. Or...
I'll blow it up, yes.
Yeah. Yep. So, as you say, you hit your magnum opus straight out of the gate.
I didn't mean to. That's just how it happened.
Did you get hit by difficult second album syndrome?
No,
that?
difficult third album syndrome.
Really?
The first 2 Echo books were really easy to write. The third one was an absolute beast. I don't know why. I really, really struggled with it. It took me 2 drafts of the whole thing to actually finally get it finished.
Wow. It's that point, that hiccup that everyone seems to hit. And the thing which always fascinates me is everyone seems to hit it at a slightly different point.
Place, yeah. I think the first 2 books and the beginning of the third one I had written before, sprawly though they may have been. And I think I got to the point where I caught myself up. And that was where I tripped. I don't quite know what I'm doing. I also had a lot of threads. There are a lot of plot threads to cross over and tie up. And I had to make sure that I did it all correctly and did it all in order.
So a lot of that process ultimately became kind of write a little, get your bearings, make sure everything's in place, keep
narrow
going.
it down, fold it in, narrow it down, fold it in, so that it all worked at the end. But
it's interesting that in one of those things where you sometimes spot a pattern before there is a pattern. I've encountered 3 or 4 authors who've talked about this. Cameron Hurley's Light Brigade, the last 18 months of the draft for that, I remember her talking about how 2/3 of it was done, and the rest of it was, it was the full-on multicoloured post-it notes on the wall and rearranging them routine. So, you get past difficult third album syndrome.
I get past difficult third album syndrome.
What happens next?
I always knew what I was going to do next. Always knew what I was going to do next. Writers' workshops, again, back in my 20s, I wrote a little short that was about, I don't think it was even 5,000 words, it might have been 2, called Till Death Do Us Part, which was another sort of cyberpunky thing about an unlikely romance between a young man who was a Cambridge graduate, sort of rower proper, all-round good egg, and an American spy. And it just didn't work. I took it to a writer's workshop and it was, oh dear, no. But that then became a novella called Maestro. That then became, once Echo Rising was written, my agent, bless her cotton socks, told me very sensibly, you're not going to get this published straight out the gate. You need to write your groundbreaking novel. You need to write your little novel, your 90k. I'll trundle this round for you, but you need to write something bite-sized.
So it was almost the old, okay, this is great, now you need to work for a little while to be discovered overnight kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So I then rewrote that novella as a thing called Seventh Daughter, again, still set in London, still with those 2 characters, but it didn't get picked up, and in the meantime Echo got picked up by Titan, so the opus got published, but it was always the thing I was going to go back to. And after Echo was finished, I went back to it and I thought, I'm not going to do Parallel in London. It's been done to death, and it's been done by smarter and wiser people than me, and I don't think I can do it justice. I want to take it away from its original story, make it something new, so I'm going to set it. It needs to be set in a city, so I'm going to enclose that city. I'm going to set the city in a crater, in a caldera, so that the whole story can actually focus on the characters, on their relationships, and on the incredible intricacies of their respective relationships with their families and with each other, which is where Artifice came from.
See, I have 2 immediate responses to that. And the first is that the hilariously failed geologist in me just gets very happy anytime someone says words like caldera. And the second is, so you kind of use the geography of the location
to focus on the story
and to structure the plot. And that's very cool. That's very cool.
Thank you. I didn't realise it was.
It really is.
It was unconscious because it had been set in London, and because I didn't want to go into vast fantasy world building because it just wasn't necessary for the story. So it was enclosed in a city. And when I do get round to writing the second one, which I will, we're going to branch out a bit. So
we go from sociopathic cyberpunk assassin, slowly steps very grumpily out into the light and sets fire to some of it along the way, to a almost Philby and Burgess-esque spy romance, which then becomes a class-based fantasy story.
It's an urban fantasy fairy story. It's a bit of a love story. It's a bit of a detective story. I can't really classify Artifice down any of its individual genre. You know, it's not urban fantasy, it's not a romance, it's not fantasy, it's not science fiction. It's a little bit of everything. I like to think of it as a fairy story. It's probably the closest you'll get.
You have all those genres surrounded, basically.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was fairly massive from what you say from the original story to now. It was fairly massively revised, and I find it interesting that this seems to be a very big part of the process. The Echo books were written a couple of times. Do you have a massive folder somewhere of offcuts?
Yeah, and I've pretty much used it all up now.
Really?
Yeah. So
what does that feel like?
Slightly rootless.
Wow.
Yes, I've got lots of ideas, and I've got all sorts of notes and things I'm going to do. You know, I've got an interim project that I'm doing in between doing a lot of the sisters stuff that I keep going back to. But there's nothing else big that I can go back and re-access.
Wow. You are the first author I've encountered who just reached this level. I kind of feel like you need a flag or a sticker or something.
No, I don't. It's not something to be necessarily proud of. I've run out of old energies that I can pick from, if you like. I've got to try and do some new stuff.
Or you've funneled them into fantastic stories.
Or perhaps I've gone past it. You know,
exactly.
You know, you do reach a point in your life where those stories of your youth have to change. Or you go past them, or you need to write something else. Who knows?
That deeply weird moment where you suddenly realise you have a past. After having lived in the moment for a long time. Yeah, that's very strange. Now, there's another fairly major change between the Echo books and Artifice, which was you went from Titan to becoming part of the benevolent conspiracy of authors that is Foxberry Books.
Foxberry Books is a
How did that come about? How did that come about?
Well, Children of Artifice was turned down by every major UK BSFA publisher because it didn't. I think because it didn't stick to the genre lines closely enough. But I say that, and being with a small press, it's found its natural home. It fits at Foxberry. Adele's been absolutely fantastic, and I think it found a place where it was meant to be.
That's really interesting to me because it kind of speaks again to one of those conversations that seems to happen around genre quite a lot, which is how is the ecology laid out? You have the big presses and you have the various smaller ones orbiting them. And I've not heard the point articulated so well before. The idea that small press excels at the books that don't quite fit in somewhere else.
Yes. A bigger publisher will look for something that has an immediate, globe and cowl on the front cover or spaceship or whatever it is. I think that they tend to look for something that will stick to the lines. They don't seem to take as many chances on fiction that's slightly different, fiction that blurs the lines slightly. It has to be quite clear.
Or if the chances are taken, it almost feels like there's here's the 1 or 2 books we're going to roll the dice on this financial period.
Yeah. The other thing about, a small press will take a chance on something a bit different. It will throw itself into that thing absolutely passionately, support it all the way through. And it will also turn it round much quicker, because obviously you're not slotted into the cogs in the machine in a big press. And a small press, you have much more say in it as well. You have much more involvement with the process.
I never put that together, but no, you are absolutely right. With a small press, it will probably see through the year that you hand it in, whereas with one of the big 5, it will be...
It's going to be 2 to 3 years, probably. Yeah.
Which do you prefer?
Pros and cons to both. Obviously, with a big press, you will have a marketing budget.
Mm-hmm.
You'll get an advance, which a small press won't have the money. It's that simple. A big press will be able to situate your book in Waterstones, in Barnes & Noble, in all of the things, but a small press probably won't. But a small press will get behind it and really, really push it, be personally involved with it, and your royalties will probably be better.
That is not something that I'd considered, but no.
Because they can't give you an advance, the deal on your royalties will be better.
That's really interesting, and it kind of speaks to something, to go very meta and industrial for a moment, that I see an awful lot of authors either choosing to or realising they have to do in the current climate, which is you have to work at every level. And, be prepared to do your own publicity if you have to. And, work with small press, work with indie, self-publish if you have to, that kind of thing. We've talked about whether there's anything that you have a preference for, and we've talked as well about the various stuff which you excise and now drawn from. Is there anything, and this isn't you have any regrets, because I don't believe in that, but I'm curious, if you were coming in now, is there anything you would do differently?
I would do it the other way round. I would save the opus to now. And then I say that, but now Artifice and Echo both were very, very deeply involved with my emotional state at the time. Echo was a very, very angular, quite angry character. Artifice was written over the illness and death of my mother, and as such it was very, very involved about family and how families work together and your family's restrictions and expectations and what they can do for you. And if I came to write Echo now, I couldn't find that anger, and I think that was what made it what it was.
So it really does become like a construct of the time in which
it's a construct of the
built.
Emotional time in which it was built. Now I think my knowledge of narrative structure and sales and appeal and all of these things are probably much better. The craft has been polished, if you like, but I haven't got that raw energy that went into it to start with when I didn't know any of this stuff. And I probably wouldn't say up quite so much.
You pick the lock instead of kick the door and stuff. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about kind of structure and method for a moment. With Artifice, which was one book, but you said there is a sequel.
There is a sequel that's sort of distilling in the back of my head, yeah.
Good. And Echo, which was a trilogy. Do you plan differently for those? And how do you plan?
I don't.
That's a good answer.
Well, I have a huge amount of admiration for all these wonderful people who have Excel sheets and coloured stickies and maps on boards and all of these things. I have basic narrative arc in my head.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know the characters always very, very well, and I have a narrative arc. I know where it's going, but I don't know how the story's going to get there until it does it.
So you're a discovery writer.
That's probably a good way of putting it. Yes, I'm a discovery writer. I know where it starts, I know where it ends, and I probably know a few places it's going to go.
I love that. That's great. And it's obviously a method that serves you very well at various lengths too. One of the other notes which I have about Artifice is something which I wanted to circle back around to, because I read your very, very good Foxborough blog post about representation and the other books that you kind of cited as navigational beacons almost on the way to Artifice. One of the things I really liked about it was the way that Artifice means very different things across the course of the book. And in particular as well, the same-sex relationship that you have in the middle of that, which is really beautifully written. And I'm curious as to whether that kind of approach, that kind of subject matter, is finding a more welcoming environment now than it was a few years ago.
I think definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. In some of the original drafts of the story that became Artifice, there was a whole subplot whereby the lead character, originally called Julian Cavendish, who became Kath, the lead character was in denial and had a fiancée.
Really?
And he'd fallen in love with this American spy, and he got all tangled up about it. But when I actually came to rewrite it properly, I said, no, I'm going to do away with all of that.
Good.
That's all gone. You know, it's going over to there you go.
Excellent. And yeah, I agree with you. It does seem to be a far more welcoming environment.
Very, very much so.
I finished watching Good Omens earlier today, and that is the sweetest angel and demon romance ever written.
I haven't seen it, but I must. I love the book. I haven't read it in years, but I love it. It
is Michael Sheen's finest work, and I mean, that's a high bar, but it's definitely worth it. Okay, so we've covered the Echo trilogy, we've covered Artifice. Yeah, there was a line in your blog post that really jumped out at me, which was the exploration of the magic of little things and the kind of mundane daily routines. It's the piece about the Wanderer was what that put me very much in mind of. And one of the things I love about your work is, regardless of what genre you work in, you can see the dirt under people's fingernails. It's fantastic stuff, and it has these huge sweeping ideas and concepts. But you feel like you could walk past these people in the street.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a conscious design choice, and it's a creative choice, I would assume, and it's one which I think is great. But is there anything that you do to consciously try and ground characters, or is it just how they come out?
No, that's just how they come out. I think many, many years of role-playing, we role-played, certainly in our youth, very, very intensely and probably far too much. You know, our cyberpunk was vast. It went on for 10 years. It spanned so many players and characters and concept gaming, strayed way, way beyond the rules that were originally written. We were all deeply absorbed in it to possibly the detraction of everything else. And I think that has actually contributed a great deal, because when I create a character, that I still draw up character sheets in whatever system feels suitable. So they have vast skill lists. They have, from Vampire, they have merits and flaws, you know, they have huge. When we say I don't plan, the characters are always planned in absolute detail. I also write aloud. So the cadence of their language and the cadence of the descriptions always has to sound good to my ears. I don't drive my son mad, actually. Shut up! But I write aloud so that I can hear them speak to me, and I hear them speak.
You see, it feels like a couple of jigsaw pieces of just like very easy to close. Because obviously, I mean, given my day job, I write aloud too. So, you know, hearing you mention that is great. And the character sheet thing actually puts me in mind of one of my favourite random factoids. John Rogers, the creator of shows like Leverage, has openly talked about how he uses Facecrawl to develop when he's building word Bibles for his shows, to develop the interrelationships between the characters. He does the same thing, roll the character off, get him out of your head. And I love that that's like your foundational approach, that even as a discovery plotter, you always know what the characters are going to do in that.
I don't have to plot for the characters, if you like, because I always know what their emotional reaction is going to be. It's almost more like acting than writing. I honestly believe that the two things are the sides of the same coin. You know, the introvert and extrovert sides of the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. That's brilliant. I love that. So what's your favourite part of the process?
My favourite part of the process? A couple of things. When you write and it's really, really going well, and you have that fantastic sensation that can only be described as writing orgasm, when you're just like going, yes, 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 and it's just pouring out of you so fast that your fingers can't keep pace, you know, and you've got loads and loads of spelling mistakes all over the screen, but you can go back and fix those in a minute, that's fine. So that's fantastic. When you hit that seat, that vein, it's glorious. And the other one is seeing your cover art for the first time. That is the moment where the thing in your head becomes the real thing. There it is. There are, I was presented with 5 bits of cover art for Echo from Martin, who did them at Titan. And obviously we went with the one we went with, but one of them was a close-up of his face with his black eyes and his slightly mottled skin. And it was the first time I had ever seen the character look back at me. And I absolutely freaked. You know, I was just completely...
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was surreal. A singular experience.
So, this is the process and your part of writing your own characters. How's it going writing other people's? Because you're stepping across into licensed fiction.
Yeah, that's a whole different ballpark, that is. The first one I did the Little Sisters of Upper short story Mercy that did really well. And then Rebellion came to me and asked me to write for Judge Anderson, and it's the first time I've ever had to write for a character that I didn't create.
Wow.
And having just talked about my character creation process, that was something that really threw me, particularly as she has such a vast canon of imagery and comics and backstory and everything else. And I was quite intimidated, you know. Not only did I have to relearn 2000 AD Mythos, because I haven't read 2000 AD in quite a while, but it's very cyberpunky, so that was okay.
Oh, good.
Yeah, but thinking myself into the head of a character that I didn't actually create in the first place was really, really strange. Yeah, so I had to almost take her back to her core elements, the core elements that they gave me, and then build her up for myself.
Out of interest, did you use the character sheet method with her?
There is a Judge Dredd role-playing game which I managed to get my grubby little mitts on.
So you did?
So I did, yes.
That's brilliant.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, that's really good. I also realised, and I think this was probably the point at which I made the breakthrough, from the original Bolland artwork that was based on Debbie Harry, she has been interpreted by so many different artists in so many different ways, all of them beautiful. And I figured, well, surely writers can do the same thing.
Mm.
You know, yes, it's going to differ subtly, of course it is, but that's the way you make it yours. You know, Bolland doesn't draw the same way as the other 2000 AD artists, so writers must be allowed a certain amount of manoeuvrability.
So obviously you get the same manoeuvrability.
Yeah.
Did you have like a laundry list going into the Anderson book of stuff you wanted to hit?
No. She's a difficult character to write for because she's omniscient. She's got Superman syndrome. You've got to disable her primary ability before you can write for her. Because she goes in, you know, there's the bad guy in the interview room. She looks at him, she goes, right, the bad guy's over there. Joe, get him. And that's it, that's your plot. You don't, so yeah, you've got to disable her ability or make the information otherwise inaccessible so that you have the narrative of her chasing it.
I'd never thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, she in particular has the easiest job of anyone
She has
inside
the
the
easiest
division.
job of anybody in the division because she just looks at you and goes, right, the bad guy's over there.
So, would you want to go back to her or to other elements of 2000 AD?
I'm up to my ears in Black Library stuff at the moment. There is possible other 2000 AD stuff in my future. We will see. I don't quite know where we're going, but yes, there may be more Judge goodness coming.
Oh, jolly good. And if I can ask, how were you approached by this? Had you arrived on someone's mythical radar, or did you pitch for it, or?
Most, going back to the industry being a big family, I started the Black Library story. They came to me and they said, we've seen your story. It was just a blanket email. We've seen your stories X and Y. Would you like to submit something? And I got carried away and wrote the story. And then I went to comics writer Danie Ware because he'd written a sister's short and asked him if he had a Bible or anything else, you know, a lexicon of terms. And then Alec, bless him, put me forward for the Anderson gig because he'd done the 3 novellas for year 1. So it was thanks to him that I got recommended to do one of them for year 2. So, you know, people do look after their own, always. It's a big old family.
So let's talk about Warhammer 40,000. Because there is no way that this will not sound churlish, and it's not intended that way. But coming after your discussion of it being one big happy family, Warhammer 40,000 fandom sometimes is not.
I haven't encountered any problems with it personally, but I do know that it has a darker underbelly, which I haven't seen. I stay off the forums and the boards because I suspect that is where a lot of it comes out. I keep half an eye on the Facebook group just to see what's going on, but mostly forums are something I tend to steer away from in general.
I feel like that should be embroidered and left on a plaque above every author's desk. All joking aside, I actually have "Do not engage."
Do not engage, yeah.
In an embroidered piece on one side of mine.
No, very wise.
That's actually a net positive, though. That it's been a very positive experience for you so far.
It's been a very positive experience. Things are changing at the Black Library, obviously. I mean, we all know that wargaming is the last bastion of the sweaty teenage geek who doesn't think girls should be doing this sort of thing anyway. And there is a certain amount of that element still there, but it is getting shouted down and getting smaller and smaller, which is fantastic to see. And there are more and more women coming into the hobby, more lady painters, more lady gamers, more female authors, more lady authors. The Black Library are approaching more women, and it's really good to see. There are also more female characters.
It's
good. It's high time. Everything
Definitely.
is changing, and it's definitely changing for the better.
So, with the kind of corner of the Warhammer 40,000 universe that you work in, are you beholden to anything? I mean, we're into what, the 75th volume of the Horus Heresy at this point? And
it was a big thing. You know, you look at the vastness of the Warhammer 40k mythology, and you can't take it all in. It's huge. You know, I don't think even Dan knows all of it. So I read the little bit of sisters fiction that there was by Jim Swallow and a few other things, and I just carved out a tiny, tiny little corner that I understood, and I started with that. And as I said, slowly I've been branching out and learning about more things.
And we were talking briefly about this before we went on air, that strikes me as actually kind of genius. Because you have the ability to parachute authors in all over, give them freedom to do what they want to do within varying restraints, and then potentially, as time goes by, their work will organically show up in other people's.
Yeah, and the Black Library is very good at publishing. If you write for them a story, a novella, a novel, or whatever it is, it will publish it in multiple formats, and again, and again, and again. And people keep buying it.
I forget the exact maths, but someone worked out, I think it's next year, the Horus Heresy comes into land, and technically it's eligible for the best series Hugo.
Oh, good lord.
Yeah, it's something like 75 books.
It's something like that, it's huge. Yeah.
And then there's the audio dramas and the comics as well.
It is. Yeah, it is vast. absolutely glass. As I say, I've only clawed my way out, tiny little corner, and then I'm learning as I go.
So, this is a leading question, and it's one that I kind of have to get out of the way. Do you have a preference? Do you prefer writing your own characters or writing licensed?
They're very different. Your own characters, you have much, much more freedom. You can get very deeply personally involved with them. You can do almost whatever you want. Writing licensed fiction, you have to stick between some very, very rigid guidelines. Very rigid guidelines. The Black Library are very adamant about their terminology, about their weaponry, that you have to stick to within the guidelines of the Mythos, also within their tone of voice and everything else. You know, you do as you're told. Having said that, though, they are a lot of fun to write. I like writing combat. It appears to be one of my fortes, so I just have a lot of fun writing warrior nuns kick ass. You know. So, this almost brings us up to date. And I'm curious, you mentioned that there's a couple of things you're working on at the moment. Yeah.
So we'll start there. What are you working on at the moment?
I've just handed in another 3 outlines for More Nuns with Guns, one short story, one more novella, and the novella is going to be part of a portmanteau, so I'm writing the overarching thing for that as well.
Oh, brilliant.
I've also decided to lay my arse on the line. I'm going to tackle an audio script for the first time ever. I've never tried writing one before.
So is it a spec one, or is it writing to order, or what?
Oh no, it's More Sisters. It's all More Sisters, because with the Sisters Battle rules are coming out, I think, towards the end of this year, so they want as much Sisters fiction as I can possibly churn out. But yes, it was a chance to do something different. So I've got various examples. I've got an actual sort of guide to follow and things. So that should be fun. I'm quite enjoying it.
Fantastic. Yeah. And what about your own work?
That's a top secret interim project that I'm probably 10, 12 chapters into, about 50k, but I'm only getting a chance to do it a couple of months here and a couple of months there. It's taken me 3 years to get it this far. So at this rate, I should probably finish it about the time that Isaac leaves home. It's unpublishable, and I know it's unpublishable because it's far, far too self-indulgent. But, you know, having done every other route of publishing, I might just stick it on Amazon anyway, and see if anybody buys it. Why not?
I'm really glad you brought that up, because again, this is something which I've encountered from 4 or 5 different authors across the last year. I don't know whether it's a kind of sign of the times or something, but everyone seems to have that project they know will never land, and they don't care, and you just write it anyway.
It's the thing that always flickers away in the back of your head, you know. It's the story that won't leave you alone. But yes, I've still got the second draft of this book to do as well, which I know that Adele will publish if ever I actually get round to finishing it, and there's just so many exciting and wonderful things.
You mentioned Isaac.
Yes.
And I'm curious, everyone obviously, with the positive exception of George R.R. Martin, who we're fairly certain at this point is just plugged directly into a word processor. Everyone has different objectives and different kind of daily obligations they have to meet. Do you have any life hacks for how you get your words done?
Always keep I have a job, I have a commute, I have a child, I don't have much time. So always keep the story in your head. Even if you don't have time to write anything, read it, reread it, always keep it alive, always keep the characters talking to you, talking to each other. Use the time when you have it. If you have 5 minutes between this thing and the other thing, just write a little bit down if you can. You know, always just keep it going, keep it going. Don't necessarily stick to daily word count, because sometimes when I'm tired or when I'm stressed, I find myself writing 1,000 words of complete rubbish just to get it done, and then I have to come back to it and go, actually no, that's bollocks, let's get rid of that. Always leave yourself an in. It's an old Kurt Vonnegut trick, I think, that you never stop at a natural break. Yeah? So you can always just pick it straight back up again from where you were. You know, you don't stop at the end of a chapter. At the moment, I get an hour in the morning between my son leaving for school and me leaving for work, and I try, having said don't get hung up on daily word count, I try to do 500 words a morning, whether I'm in the mood or not. You know, have a big cup of coffee and then get it done, and then I will come back and sort it out when I've got the time, because it's a lot easier to re-edit it or edit it down than it is to write it from scratch.
Mm-hmm. I love that you brought up the Vonnegut thing, because that I've used that and it does work. Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I can always tell it works. When you get to the point where you have to leave it and you're slightly annoyed.
Yes.
Yeah, you step away from the computer going, I will see you later.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Excellent. the other thing which you put me in mind of was, I think it was Robert Cargill who talked about just write 100 words. They don't even have to be good, just write 100 words a day. And if you do it for 365 days, look at how many words you've got, look at what you can work with. And I mean, again, it's one of the things I'm really interested in at the moment, this kind of ongoing negotiation every creative has with the ongoing pressures of daily life, and how you can get it done at the same time as still getting something approximating a normal night's sleep. And
it's getting it all in.
so we're kind of, if I'm reading the time right, we're rounding the corner onto, I think, our last 5 minutes. Excellent. And with that in mind, two more questions, and we're probably about done. A couple of days ago, the actor Simu Liu, who's, and I apologise in advance to him if I pronounced his name wrong, was cast as Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu. 2 years ago, he tweeted at Marvel, "So, when are we going to talk about casting me as Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu?" And after it was announced, literally he came off stage and tweeted at them with, "Thanks for getting back to me." And there has been this kind of very sweet Twitter kind of hashtag doing the rounds for the last couple of days of speak what you want into the world. So, what's the dream job?
What's the dream job? Blimey. I am in the rather odd position of having landed my dream job and then having got myself knocked up a month later and not been able to do it. You know, you know what I mean? I started at Forbidden Planet, I had this fantastic opportunity, this immense job, and then I had Isaac. Mm-hmm. And I've stayed at FP, and I am extraordinarily fortunate. The things I've got to do, the people I've got to meet, the events I've run, you know. But there's always that part of me that didn't get to do it all. You know, I love my son with all my heart, and I wouldn't swap him for anything. But there are so many things so many additional things that I could have done and I could have been involved in, even if I just had another 5 years or something, you know. But yes, I have to say, my job is extraordinarily. The people I've met, the things I've done, it's amazing.
You do have an unbelievably cool job.
I do have an unbelievably cool job.
Excellent. One more question, and then we'll round out. Mm-hmm. Single piece of advice for any creative.
My brain has now gone completely blank. A single piece of advice for any creative. No, my brain has gone completely blank. I have a single piece of advice, which is fantastic. You've asked me, you put me on the spot, and it's completely gone out of my head. You know, the one thing I can think of is this too shall pass, but that's not particularly about creativity. That's just a life hack. Whatever it is, good, bad, indifferent, fantastic, terrible, it will pass in the end. As
someone who's contemplated getting the only way out is through with a tattoo on a couple of occasions, I can relate to that. I think, yeah.
No, but I think the single piece of advice is one that was given to me when I was in the process of trying to sell my house and dealing with my mother and had lawyers coming out of my ears. You can eat an elephant if it's one bite at a time.
Oh.
Doesn't matter what it is. 100 words a day, one bite at a time. You can do it.
I love that. And I think that's probably a perfect note to wrap up on.
Well, no, thank you very much. It's been fantastic.
Thank you. This has been great. We have a small but perfectly formed audience, and I believe we have a couple of minutes for questions, if anybody has them.
I have a quick one, Danie.
Yes.
Nice to see you. As you say, in a sense, you're doing a kind of dream job in a way, connected with Forbidden Planet in scientific and Titan publishing. Looking back to those authors who are no longer with us, who would you love to have sat down and had a chat with?
Oh gosh, I never got to meet David Gemmell. Brian Aldiss I met when he was quite elderly, an absolutely lovely man, wonderful man he was. I had the fortune of seeing James Herbert at one of the really, really big fantasy cons, and he was fantastic, like being in the presence of a god. But, you know, the people, they were absolutely worshipping him with his bottle of absinthe. That was amazing.
Did he have the leather jacket as well?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yes, absolutely. I'm just trying to think. And Robert Holstock.
Okay, Robert,
yeah. I think I met him very briefly in my very early days, also gone. Sir Terry came in many, many times.
Yes.
Yeah, I think he signed with us 32, 33 times or something.
Wow.
Yeah, and he, bless him, he fought it tooth and nail right up to the end. He was still coming in. He was still seeing his fans. He really, really was quite a force to be reckoned with. Yeah, it's put me in a position of seeing and meeting many, many wonderful people, some of whom are no longer with us.
Thank you. Anybody else? Go ahead.
At Forbidden Planet, is there any particular genre that you're dealing with within there that you've noticed there's been an increase, an upturn in the fandom of it, in the last few years that you've noticed?
YA fiction is really coming to the fore, and I don't know if that's just because it's not something I read, sadly, but I don't know if that's just because it's now arriving on my radar, so I'm more aware of it. But we've got a new books buyer with the company who is very, very plugged into her YA fiction, and she's got a lot of connections. So it's something that the company is now taking on board more and more of. And I think that it's become much larger in the last sort of 4 or 5 years. It's had a whole new credibility and a whole new audience. And it's really interesting to see. It's bringing more people and new people into reading SFA fiction, which is always fantastic.
And you're managing to getting the young adult fiction authors in.
Funnily enough, tomorrow night we've got 8 of them in the store, which is going to be very warm, I suspect. Yes, it is. Yes, they're coming in sort of pre-Yalp, so we're very fortunate. We've got Owen Colfer coming in. We've got Danielle Clayton, half a dozen others, and it's going to be big. I think it's also going to be quite hot.
Yeah, definitely. Anybody else?
Yeah, you were mentioning before, you were mentioning a passion project that you wanted to put on Amazon.
Yeah.
I was wondering what your thoughts were on self-publishing in general.
If it's a book, write it. Publish it with the big publishers, the small publishers. Put it out yourself. Put it on Wattpad, a chapter at a time. Get yourself a Patreon, a coffee, whatever it is. If it's your thing, get it out there. I'm not trying to get snooty about these things. I don't know why people do. It's very silly.
Exactly. Any more? I think we're done. In which case, Danie, thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
This has been
that was amazing. Thank you very much.
This has been fantastic. And like I said, thank you very much, and have a good evening, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.